So, newsflash, everybody in the world kind of has concerns about Apple's ability to step into finally meaningfully the AI game, whether it's asking Siri for things other than the weather and getting frustrated with the answers, or what time it is, or what have you, or all sorts of other things. But Steve is somewhat optimistic, and I'm excited to hear more about some protocols they very well might have released. And if I'm wrong on that, Steve, you have to correct me. I apologize. I'm not as familiar.
Yeah.
All I recently have remembered about Apple and the AI game is I listened to the most recent All In podcast, and it was terrifying the way that Chamath Palihapitiya took them apart. And he tends to be right a lot in these areas. So we'll just leave it at that. So, Steve, with that lovely, lovely setup, I don't know if that's an alley oop, which I normally do, but you know how I feel about the importance of just calling it like it is in enterprise AI in particular. So help us understand, is Apple finally figuring something out in this area?
So yeah, I mean, the classic Apple, they're a little late to the game across the board. And I think, the interesting thing about uh, the AI capabilities that they have released in the past, like Siri and others, it's been out for a while, but it just hasn't really made vast improvements. But there's kind of like this shift in the market where, like, they owned obviously the app space and the mobile space, and they continue to do that, right? And there's the concept of there's an app for that, right? Now there's the concept of there's an agent for that. So it's almost like the Apple has to play in this space even more so and dig deeper. So at the Worldwide Developer Conference, they came out with what's called the Foundations Model Framework, and there's a lot of these frameworks coming out, right? Whether or not it's MCP with Claude's backing or A2A from Google, this is just kind of where things move. New tech comes out, frameworks come out, big tech players come out with their kind of view of the world, and then certainly how to have developers and technologists work into their ecosystem. Apple has always had a very closed ecosystem in everything they do. So I think this is another step for them in that same direction. But what they're trying to do is make it all about the user experience, which is a very consistent Apple thing, right? User experience on the phone, user experience to basically allow app developers to use the capabilities of third parties, AI developers, as well as their own, and then bake it into their suite of hardware products, right? So I think it's interesting. Time will tell, right? In terms of if they're going to advance the market in this space, but I do think they have like such a closed up ecosystem that it is a way for developers and engineers to sort of tap in AI, pull in other pieces of AI into that ecosystem. So for us, I think we've been focused around everything user experience. I think there's a lot, and Tati, appreciate your views on this. There's a lot out there in the world around how AI is very complex and very tech focused. And we've been advancing things, building things to really focus on user experience and how does that work within the retail store, within various different industries. And I think this is another step in that direction. So I think it is a good step overall for the industry, trying to bake in various different user experience aspects and the use of AI within those, the native user experience that are there on the phone. So
No. Oh, hold on. I love what you just said there. And I think you unpacked it perfect. I want to jump in and then throw it to Tati because I want to tee up Tati because I think this is interesting in particular, right? So, Steve, I'm gonna play it back, and you correct me if I'm wrong. I didn't do the research, but essentially, it sounds like Apple's introduced a framework that could potentially enable a developer and or a team to develop agentic, agentic enabled user experiences by enabling people to build agents that could potentially operate like applications do today within the App Store across their collective, kind of devices and ecosystem, right? So I'm assuming that's Okay. So you're stepping into a territory soon, very quickly, which I think we're all going to experience, which is because of stuff like this, A2A, MCP protocols, this, that, the other thing, all sorts of agents are going to be able to not only operate on behalf of a business or a human, but they're going to be able to operate and interact with each other as well.
Yeah.
And competitive businesses are going to be able to enable their agents to compete, with other competitive businesses, but also collaborate. And so, long story short, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure this one out. Is we're going to step into second order thinking. If you want to start investing in building AI agents, you now have to start thinking about a lot of questions in regards to your point, Steve. How and where and when should I get started? And if my existing tech stack looks like this versus something else, and all these folks are making all these promises, whiz bang, this, that, and the other thing, it's like, I guess, Tati, just going to you, when it comes to the framework of thinking through, how would you think about, making a decision about how should customer experience be enhanced, but not be overly engineered and complicated by all of a sudden all these players bringing out this agent for that, this agent for this, data sets over here. Like, there's just, it feels like it's about to get very chaotic. And I wonder, just from your lens, how you think about CX in relation to all these emerging opportunities, and how you might think about a crawl, walk, run, and how an Apple might, kind of get on your radar versus, insert name of competitive player,
Now, and it's funny because as we're talking about this is taking me back, as you're framing the question, it's taking me back to thinking when we had the first CRM software that came out, right? It was going to solve everyone's problems.
Problems.
We're never going to have a problem connecting with a customer ever again, and everything was going to be great. And that's not really what we saw. So you either saw something that was... One really important thing about customer experience is, and this is a word that's thrown out there so often, but it's so misused, is personalization.
Yeah.
Right. So the connection here, it's and that's the thin line, which we go back to our two favorite words, domain expert. Unless you have the right domain experts, unless you're looking at the entire ecosystem, unless you're making decisions based on what you want that experience to be for the customer, and work backwards from there, you are either just creating something that is complete, that is the same everywhere, doesn't feel special, doesn't feel personalized, doesn't feel that is for you, or you create something that's over complicated, right? And it's complex to update, it's complex to resolve the things you need. And the truth is that there is a bit of a conundrum with customer experience, which again, most companies fail to be able to productize that, because you have, at the same time that you have a need for personalization, you also have the same 8 or 10 problems that everyone's dealing with. So how do you do that in a way that feels right? I think back to Apple, they have this has has everything to go. If it goes right, it has all of the components, right? So Apple, if you think about it, like frictionless, right? The piece that things are, it's AI would show up potentially. It's not, this, it will summarize your notifications. It will do the things, rewrite your messages. It will help you faster without you asking, without you. I was reading the other day that one of the biggest skills that we're going to need to have is prompting. Probably not, actually, because it's, as this evolves, the whole prompting thing becomes, less and less necessary. It's kind of like coding in a way back in the day. And you have, the fact that users won't need to understand the model to use it, I think, is something that always plays in their favor. It feels more intuitive. And what it does, because what Apple has done with the iPhone and other devices, is that it builds emotional loyalty, which is what ultimately you're looking for with CX. And then there's the whole piece on privacy concerns as well. From what I understand, this is also very, very well put together in terms of privacy, and they built that with that in mind, as they usually do. So that's a strain. But then on the other end, you could have something that's over optimized as the opposite of the right CX. They own everything, and they have a way in which they see things happening, and either you love it or you don't. And in this case, it's a little bit different than your iPhone. And I also, because I think the customer is much farther in that journey, I think it'll be much harder to wow the customer in that sense, to say, okay, this is the end all be all. When we often compare this to either iTunes, I saw the comparisons as iTunes or iPhone, or it was a very different time and place. So the fact that you have this minimal user agency, uh, the eye is very subtle, but it's also very hidden, right? You don't have customization, you don't have the piece in which and that is something that to me raises some flags, because CX includes good CX, good customer experience. It's the opposite, right? You have at least you feel you have user agency. Whether you do or not is a different story, but you feel like you're interacting with it. So and then the third thing for me in all this is this really going to move the needle for businesses? Because when we talk about businesses and finding out the root causes, again, this is very personal. Some of these things are very personalized to what you need. And what Apple does, it tends to kind of homogenize the whole thing and make it all. So again, to me, that'll be interesting to look at this, like design versus outcomes on the business side, and what that user experience, how is that user experience going to help move the needle for a business? Because emojis are super nice and writing suggestions and all those things, but they're not really moving the needle for the business.
Yeah, it's a great point, and I think that, to build on that a little bit, right? What you're saying without even saying it, and I'll just go ahead and say it, is like, instead of starting with the technology, right? Start with the CX, start with the business, start with the user. Classic Steve Jobs, isms. And I wonder, Alec, I'll go to you on this one, because I know you're neck deep in the data space within the sports environment, which also includes, obviously, the importance of CX as well. And there could be some tangible, insights that you might have in reacting to this. But how do you think about data and actioning the data to enrich a customer experience? And whether you do or don't have Apple on your radar, neither here nor there, but would wonder just if you have some comments on the way you all think about data insights and CX that might be relevant to what Steve and Tati just shared.
Yeah, I think so. For us, and I'm mainly focused on the call it health and performance verticals. But for us, you know, 90% of people who are active, right? So who own like a wearable device, um, are say that they're overwhelmed with data, and that their data, that their devices, their apps that they're using, right, that they've purchased to help them achieve their health, fitness, activity goals, are really just the people feel inundated with the amount of data out there, and they want more guidance, more personalization. And Tati, I think that's a lot of what you were just talking about, right? And so I think for us, it's about, at least in that space, is how do you take all of this data and basically bridge the gap between data and helping people achieve their health, fitness, activity goals, in a way that is as simple as possible. Um, so instead of right now, where a lot of people are trying to interpret what HRV means, and how what they should be eating after a workout. in order to stay healthy? How do you improve the customer experience so that people don't feel like they need to interpret all of this data, but instead are just kind of almost getting like a navigation system or guidance on how this data can help them achieve their results.
And I'll
Yeah.
just add to
Oh, go ahead,
I
Tati.
I was just going to jump in because what you're talking about is exactly the same. The challenge was we don't need more data, we need insight.
No. Mm-hmm.
So that's the thing. And thinking about my own wearable, do I need it to tell me more things? Not really. I needed to help me to get there better, easier,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
faster. I have a whole lot of reports I can just click on and look at, and remind me that I didn't hit my cardio load yesterday. That's
Right.
nice, but so
Yeah.
to your point, like that's the challenge with all of this, and the area specifically in terms of customer experience, but also the operational excellence that supports and enables customer experience to exist at a high level is how it's not more data. People don't want more data, they want the insight. But that's where it gets funky, because they want their insight, they want what's going to help them, and whoever cracks that nut is really going to be ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to that point, I mean, here comes the the expected Alec pitch, which is data infrastructure, data platforms, right? That's where you find the BI, the descriptive analytics. That's where you can unlock the predictive analytics, right? That's where you can unlock prescriptive analytics, and then all of that can be plugged into, pick your choice of framework, but digital labor that can get those things done for you, whether it's shock and awe customer experiences that are based on a high probability CX, drivers for humans at a one-to-one level. I mean, there's just so much stuff, but it's funny. The more things change, the more they stay the same. It's like data versus, well, so what? What's the insight? And then how do you action it?
Yeah.
So yeah.
Completely. And I'll just add, the so last year we looked back at public complaints from about the wearable companies and the products, and by far the number one complaint by consumers was, you're giving me so much data, you're not telling me what to do with it. And that, I think, fits perfectly what we're talking about right now, is just this, there's so much data out there, right? But people want to know what to do with it. They want it to make their lives easier. So that's where the customer experience becomes really, really important.
Yeah, and that CX actually allows you to create habits too, right? Like the insights create actions, which then creates habits. So that's big in the health and human performance world, right? Because we're all, unless you get into a habit, then you're just kind of going back in circles. So it's got to be the proactive insights, it's got to be personalized insights, and then it's got to be habit forming for sure.
It actually does the opposite. If you have too much, if there's a very well-known retail, and we use this in luxury a lot, but there's a well-known retail technique for sales that when you bring out too many items,
Yeah.
you overwhelm people. There's a lot of studies around this.
Yeah.
And when there's too many things, they can't make a decision. Therefore, they walk away from it.
Like,
So when we have too much data, we tend to, I'm guilty of this, of maybe having unsubscribed to something that was throwing so much data at me that I just felt like I couldn't keep up with it. And it was another thing for me too. And it was like, all right, we're good. Let me just, eliminate this thing that is not where the friction supersedes the value. You're having more friction than value, and you're just like, all right, I'm gonna walk away from this. And we had so many conversations in so many spheres about this that I think is definitely that should be at the center of the discussion around this.
Yeah, it sounds like the AI space right now, right? There's so much going on. There's so much out there, and people are trying to use AI for everything. But at the end of the day, if it doesn't solve a real world problem, then it just becomes noise. So there's certainly a lot of noise. I think we talked about that last time. In the AI space around AI. So cutting down the noise is good, and keeping it simple focused on the user experience, all goodness.
And I think that another key to this, and we talk about this so much in our work, is around not trying, you cannot try to solve every problem. And that tends to be when you have a lot of data, especially, you tend to, you have a lot of people involved. And then, I come up with this one, you come up with that one, you come up with, all of a sudden we walk away and we're trying to solve 14 problems at once. And we think we nailed it. And it's overwhelming because you first you really can't prioritize 14 different things, but no matter how you slice it, despite what large consultancies may tell you that you can slice it in different ways and still do it, but you can't. So
Yeah, I think this is a good place to kind of cut it and wrap it up, because I think if I were to speculate, those that are watching this in particular, that pain point of too much data, not enough insight, not enough personalization, not enough CX, I think you're going to hear a lot more loud concern and frustration around that, and just simplify it to something that we can actually use that creates tangible, value, and then you build on it from there. But it is exciting, obviously, and hopefully Apple figures things out. I know, Steve, you got them in your heart. You got them. They're going to get their AI act together. Don't believe Chamath Palihapitiya and everybody else. They're going to get there one day or another, but appreciate everyone. And thanks, Alec, for joining us. Feels weird
Thanks
to
for
say
having me.
Alec. Very unusual that I ever say that ever, for obvious reasons, but we'll all talk soon. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
See ya.